At number 5, Grave Encounters. Now, you guys had a lot to say about this particular film in the first part of this series, and rightly so, because, put it this way, if every episode of Most Haunted was as awesome as this, then we'd have enough content to keep us going for the next few decades. Written and directed by the Vicious Brothers, aka Colin Minahan and Stuart Ortiz, Grave Encounters is a 2011 Canadian supernatural horror film that strikes at the vein of paranormal reality TV, which, as I mentioned previously, is a much needed antidote to the found footage genre as a whole. We as an audience need to be able to suspend our disbelief when faced with such a personal depiction of horror. Again, it strikes the question, why are they still filming? Well, this film follows Lance Preston, the charismatic host of Grave Encounters, an infamous ghost investigation TV series, and his crew as they make their way through the abandoned mental asylum Collingwood Psychiatric Hospital. What plays out is a genuinely nerve-wracking classical ghost story. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, there's not much more to the plot other than the pursuit of the paranormal and the pains that come with it. But as far as that goes, Grave Encounters does it very convincingly, and it's jammed with some genuinely uneasy moments. So much so that the Vicious Brothers have extended the Grave Encounters series and developed quite the cult following in the process. Coming in next at number 4, Devil's Pass. Now, if you're aware of the Dyatlov Pass incident, then this film will definitely strike a chord as a terrifying adaptation of the notorious unexplained mystery. For those of you not aware with the mystery, the Dyatlov Pass incident was the unsolved death of 9 ski hikers in the northern Ural Mountains in 1959, in the then former Soviet Union. To this date, their cause of death is still undetermined, and the strange occurrences surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incidents has been the imaginative spark for dozens of conspiracy theories and paranormal tales. So as far as a horror movie goes, Devil's Pass draws from some pretty impressive source material. Directed by Rennie Harlin, the man responsible for A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Devil's Pass follows the story of 5 college students who were determined to make a film about the Dyatlov mystery, and what plays out is an unnerving interpretation of the events that transpired. To be honest, if you're not a fan of conspiracy theories and government cover-ups, you might feel a bit bogged down with this film, but if you are, then Devil's Pass is a sci-fi horror heart-pounding ride through the found footage genre that's smartly made and surprisingly hilarious in parts. Next up at number 3, Hell House LLC. I went into this film with 0 expectations and was terrifyingly surprised at how bloody good it was. If you're a fan of The House's October Built, which was featured on our first list, then you'll find all of the same tropes in Hell House, but with more emphasis on the documentary style meta world building that found footage is so well built for. This film kind of went under the radar for most people and was shipped directly to on-demand services, but what's surprising about this film is how well made it is for something that was never intended to be seen on the big screen. To be honest, Hell House never really strays too far from its driving paranormal mystery, and we're never fully given an explanation that diverges from the main cast perspective. But that's also why it kind of works. There's no exposition in this film at all, and that's the way it should be, and it convincingly captures the feeling of the unknown. By playing out as a slow crawl that gradually unravels in media res, what we get is a genuinely terrifying paranormal mystery that, if we suspend our disbelief, could just as well be real. Swinging in at number 2, The Taking of Deborah Logan. To be honest, this film could get on this list just for one scene in particular, and if you've seen The Taking of Deborah Logan, then you'll know exactly what scene I mean. If you've never seen this film, you've probably already seen the gif of it, because holy moly, that one's messed up. I don't say this lightly, The Taking of Deborah Logan is a really good horror flick, irregardless of the found footage genre. I think then that's part of the reason why it was dismissed. People were tired of the same old, and as soon as they heard the phrase found footage slapped onto it, they didn't give it the chance it deserved. But what they would have found is a convincing display of found footage horror at its best. Directed and co-written by Adam Robitel, The Taking of Deborah Logan follows a documentary crew who are making a research film on patients suffering from Alzheimer's. Their subject is Deborah Logan, an elderly woman with an aggressive form of the disease, but as the crew quickly realizes that prognosis is pretty far from being correct, and there's something much more sinister at work. One of my favorite parts of this film is Gavin, who, after finding out that there's ritualistic murders involved, he just straight up quits on the spot and leaves. I love it, and we never see him again. He's just straight up gone, living his best life. Remember guys, if you ever find yourself in a horror movie situation, be more Gavin. And finally, at our number 1 spot, The Tunnel. Holy moly, this film is ridiculously good. Equal parts thoroughly entertaining, convincingly made, and just straight up terrifying. Which makes it so much more impressive then that this is essentially a fan-made film, crowd-funded by selling individual digital frames for $1 a piece. Now, I will forgive most criticisms with this film, and to be honest, if you weren't a fan of the Blair Witch Project, then in all likelihood, you won't enjoy this. It is very unforgiving with its handheld sequences, there's a lot of disorientating shots, but I don't know about you, that's exactly what I want in found footage horror. I want to feel like I've stumbled upon a tape that shouldn't be seen. It's the reason why I believe found footage horror can be so effective when it's done right. It's not entirely what we see, it's the small moments of chaos that force our imagination to fill in the gaps. On top of that, we have an extra layer of exposition from the documentary sequence, allowing us to witness how the imminent threat ahead has already affected the survivors. What we get is a terrifying display of claustrophobic horror that seriously is edge of your seat stuff. Give this one a watch and then let me know your thoughts in the comment box down below, and maybe we'll have enough traction to pull off a part 3.
We begin with the Blair Witch Project. We can't kick off a found footage horror movie without including the one that started it all. Released in 1999, the Blair Witch Project utilized found footage so effectively that people truly believed what they were seeing was really documentary footage. The movie follows 3 students, Heather, Michael and Joshua, who hike into a Maryland forest in 1994 to film a documentary about the Blair Witch, a myth that has supposedly terrified locals for years. However, over the course of the 81-minute fright fest, strange things begin to happen, whether it be finding stick figures outside their tents or their belongings rifled through, or even one of them missing in the dead of night. The friends film their relentless ordeals in the woods, and we experience anguish alongside them as their one source of safety is removed from them, their map. They are well and truly lost, and Joshua is missing, somewhere in the woods. Is it the Blair Witch, or something even darker and more sinister? I have to say, the first time I watched the Blair Witch Project, I was paralyzed in fear at the final frame of the movie. For a movie with such a small budget and only 3 characters for the majority of the film, it is so effective at delivering horrors and making you feel just as trapped as the 3 students. For any horror movie lover, this should always be a first on your list, and if you haven't seen it yet, I am very disappointed. Before we continue, let me know below what your favorite found footage horror movie is, and maybe give this video a like once you're down there. Next up, we have The Visit. While most are 50-50 about M. Night Shyamalan and his delivery of effective twists and turns, this man does have my heart, and I will argue that The Visit is one of the most horrifying movies to date. This 2015 horror movie follows siblings Becca and Tyler, who are visiting their grandparents on their farm for the first time. Like all horrors, things begin normal at first but soon descend into madness and chaos as the grandparents start acting very, very strangely. Determined to figure out what is going on, Becca and Tyler try to unravel the mystery by recording the strange events, some of which include the grandmother projectile vomiting, screaming into the camera and chasing the siblings under the foundation of the house in one of the most chilling and heart-racing scenes in the entire movie. The Visit feels like there is reality behind it. How many of us haven't met our relatives? And if you did, you would trust them, right? They're family after all. The Visit feels a little too real with how it documents these kids meeting their grandparents for the first time, and the sinking feeling they feel when things begin to grow increasingly more sinister while being trapped on a farm with essentially strangers. Can you trust them? As M. Night Shyamalan loves to do, there are of course countless twists and turns to float your boat, and this movie doesn't neglect that, with it having perhaps one of my favorite twists in a found footage horror movie. The Visit successfully reinvents a saturated subgenre so effectively it feels like it was being done for the very first time. If you haven't yet watched it, you absolutely should, and if you didn't like it, you're wrong. Moving on, we have As Above, So Below. In my opinion, this is the most underrated movie on our entire list. When I discuss my love for this movie, I'm either met with disgust or people being confused about what the hell I'm talking about. This managed to fly under the radar, but for those who haven't seen it, it's a love or hate kind of movie. Released in 2014, this found footage horror gem takes place in the Paris catacombs, which is utterly terrifying. It follows a documentary crew as they explore the catacombs in hopes of finding the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance discovered by Nicholas Flamel. which is said to grant immortality and turn metals into gold. Not bad. This all may sound familiar to you if you have seen the first Harry Potter movie, but trust me when I say this movie is wildly different. The movie in essence is based on the 9 circles of hell from the poem Divine Comedy. The film primarily focused on Scarlet Marlowe, a sort of knockoff Lara Croft, but in a good way, follows her deceased father's clues as she delves deeper into the catacombs, following unmarked routes and facing challenges and terrifying occurrences. The remains of the lost aren't the only thing haunting the team, but also their own personal demons that they must conquer in order to escape. The real horrors of this movie lies in reality as we witness the characters work their way through their own inner demons and become absolved, and in some cases found guilty of their sins. As Above, So Below is a mind-bending horror because you're never quite sure what you're witnessing is real or fake. Did a man just get sucked into a burning car in the depths of the catacombs? And are people in fact performing a satanic ritual? Or is this all in the minds of the characters who are slowly losing their way? It is a movie that's so incredibly smart and often flies right over people's heads. It explores themes of greed and obsession as well as touching on spiritual motifs. Sometimes you have to wonder if chasing something forbidden is worth the cost, because the cost just might be your life in As Above, So Below. Up next we have VHS. The VHS series as a whole is excellent, particularly 1 and 2, but in this instance I'm going to strictly be discussing the first movie in the series. Released in 2012, VHS is an anthology found footage horror and is compiled of a series of interconnected shorts written by various horror directors including Adam Wingard, Ty West and David Bruckner. The connecting story follows a group of criminals hired to break into a home. However, inside they discover a collection of VHS tapes, all containing something terrifying and disturbing. From a group of friends on a paranormal investigation encountering a demon to a man with a camera recording a supernatural force, the contents of these tapes are truly horrifying. However, the standout story in the movie has to be Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner. The segment follows 3 friends who rent out a motel room and intend on bringing a woman back to record their exploits. However, things don't turn out the way they intend for the best, as the woman they select might not be human at all. Without spoiling too much, the climax of this short is truly terrifying, also unbelievably rewarding for those who weren't rooting for the 3 friends, aka me. Combining found footage with anthology is a big feat, and VHS does it incredibly well. Finally, we have Wreck. This is not only one of my favorite found footage horror movies, but one of my favorite horror movies, period. Now, this movie should not be confused with its American counterpart, Quarantine. I understand wanting to bring this movie to a broader audience, but I will always push for people to watch the original Spanish version, as it is far superior and terrifying, in my opinion anyway. Released in 2007, this Spanish found footage horror, Wreck, short for record, tells the story of a reporter and her cameraman, who are documenting and following firefighters. While things begin as normal, the firefighters soon get a call to an apartment building where a woman is trapped in her apartment. However, something sinister is happening inside. The woman displays aggression and begins to attack the firefighters, unbeknownst to them, spreading a terrifying infection that sweeps its way throughout the building, and no one is safe. Thankfully, we have the cameraman recording everything for our entertainment. The building is ultimately placed in a lockdown with no one coming in or out, with the reporter trapped inside documenting the entire thing. However, the infection isn't the only thing being housed inside the building. Something is inside the penthouse suite, and whether she wants to or not, our reporter is about to uncover the truth in the dark confines of the apartment. The final few moments of this movie are some of the most unsettling and chilling moments in any horror movie. The visual effects are unbelievably impressive for the budget, and the acting is truly superior. Will the reporter be able to uncover the truth of what is going on, and more importantly, will she escape the infection zone? What makes this movie feel so real and authentic is that it follows everyday life and forces you to doubt whether you are safe inside of your apartment building. Do you know your neighbor? Maybe you haven't seen them in a while. Maybe you've heard screaming down the hall. Wreck makes you believe anything is possible inside the confines of this apartment building, and the lockdown protocol is so believable it might just make you want to live in a house. You should absolutely give this movie a watch and let us know your thoughts below, because this one is a personal favorite of mine and I will not stop talking about it.
Number 5, The Last Broadcast. This 1998 American horror film, written, produced, and directed by Stefan Avalos and Lance Wheeler, tells the story of a documentary filmmaker named David Lee and his investigation on the fact or fiction murders, in which got him convicted in a 1995 case, apparently with the murders of his team one night during an expedition to find the mythic Jersey Devil in the Jersey Pine Barrens. The film is shot mockumentary style and employs the found footage technique. The film is believed to be the first full-length feature film shot and edited entirely on consumer-level digital equipment. And on a budget too. I love this. I'm all here for it. Main character Lee seeks to discover the truth behind these killings while making his documentary. 4 men go to the Pine Barrens, where a psychic leads them to the apparent site. During the hunt, they broadcast a live show simultaneously via TV, internet, and amateur radio. They enter the Barrens, but only one emerges alive, as the others are brutally murdered.
The likely suspect would appear to be Stephen.
Oof, spooky. Seward, the only suspect, is then charged with the murder of his team. During his murder trial, Lee receives a box containing a damaged videotape reel, which he at first assumes is the tape from the team. With the murders caught on the tape, a blurred image of the real killer is seen, and is shocked to discover that the killer is the filmmaker himself, Lee. This is a great one. I really enjoyed this movie. It's low budget, young artists. It's a pretty good storyline too. And number 4, Man Bites Dog. Man Bites Dog is a 1992 Belgian violent comedy crime mockumentary written, produced, and directed by Remy Belval, André Bonzal, and Benoit Poulvard. I tried, sorry. Who are also the film's co-editors, cinematographers, and lead actor. The film received the André Cavins Award for the best film by the Belgian Film Critics Association, and since its release, the picture has become a cult classic, and received a rare NC-17 rating for its release in the US. Yeah, I'd up that rating to a rated R if it was me. After watching bits and pieces, I can't even say that without getting chills. Look, it's pretty disturbing stuff. Shot in black and white, it's gory, like very gory. Like if Tarantino made a gory snuff film. Yeah, I actually can't even put a clip into this because the found footage parts are way too disturbing. The film follows a crew of filmmakers following a serial killer, recording his horrific crimes for a documentary they are producing. At first though, dispassionate observers, they find themselves increasingly caught up in the chaotic and nihilistic violence, eventually becoming accomplices themselves. Ben, a witty, charismatic, and an easily enraged sadistic serial killer, takes the filmmakers and the crew to witness and watch the murders, explaining why, how, and when he chooses his victims. The viewer witnesses this grisly killings and crimes in graphic detail. The camera crew becomes more and more involved with the murders and even help Ben. During filming, 2 of Ben's crews are killed by Italian mobsters, and Ben and his crew have fun taking turns as they shoot the rival crew members while recording the entire process. Like I said, it's gory. Tons more gruesome killings, and Ben is finally arrested, but then escapes. At this point, someone takes revenge on Ben, and he finds his girlfriend and family all disturbingly murdered in revenge. The camera crew and Ben are all ambushed and shot by the rival mobsters. After the camera falls, it keeps running, and the film ends with the death and of the fleeing of the suspects. Only watch this film if you can stomach disturbing scenes. Trust me, it's pretty visual. Number 3, Creep. Creep is a 2014 American found footage psychological horror directed by Patrick Bryce and is filmed as found footage and does the genre well. Bryce portrays a videographer assigned to record an eccentric client insisting on filming numerous videos for his future unborn kid. Creep was inspired by Bryce's experiences on Craigslist. Bryce and lead actor Duplass refined the film story during filming, which resulted in multiple versions of each scene and several alternate scenarios and endings. Struggling videographer Aaron accepts an assignment to travel to a remote cabin where he meets his client Joseph, who explains he has an inoperable brain tumor and is expected to die before his pregnant wife gives birth. With this, he wishes to have Aaron record a video diary for his unborn child, and throughout the videos, Joseph demonstrates behavior that makes Aaron a little uneasy, which leads in Joseph confessing some pretty heinous stuff to him. As an increasingly freaked out Aaron intercepts a phone call from Angela, who's actually Joseph's sister, and warns Aaron to escape. Joseph then attempts to stop Aaron, leading to with Aaron escaping. Then, at home, Aaron starts receiving items in the mail from Joseph, including a recording of Joseph digging a grave. Creepy. A DVD is then sent to Aaron offering an apology in a public setting, which Joseph then kills him from behind with an axe. Spoiler alert, Joseph, now calling himself Bill, later receives a phone call from his newest target as he places a DVD of Aaron's murder alongside recordings of his past victims. That's scary. Yeah, I saw a play about a gruesome Craigslist ad once. They can get pretty disturbing. The film is widely known as one of Netflix's best found footage genre movies, and there's some great jump scares in there for you. Check it out yourselves. Number 2, UFO Abduction, the McPherson Tape. UFO Abduction, also known as the McPherson Tapes, is a 1989 American found footage sci-fi horror film written, produced, and directed by Dean Elialto. The film focuses on a family who are being terrorized by extraterrestrials during a birthday celebration. The late 80s and the early 90s were ravished by an overflow of popular paranormal genre movies and TV such as The X-Files and Unsolved Mysteries. The film begins with a brief introduction that proposes the film as legitimate and one of the strongest pieces of evidence for ETs yet. On October 8th, 1983, the Van Hees family gathers in Connecticut woods to celebrate 5-year-old sister's birthday. One of the brothers uses his handheld camera to record the night's events. The evening passes relatively uneventful as the family celebrates. However, after a small power outage, the brothers walk to the neighbors to investigate, and the three eventually come across an extraterrestrial spaceship landed in the woods and are shocked to see 3 small aliens walking around. Yeah, that's creepy. They flee in a panic after the aliens notice them. Yeah, I would too if I saw them just walking around the forest. They return to the house and load shotguns, but are divided on whether they should remain in the house or leave. Classic horror movie move. After a while, they assume the visitors have left, but notice all their watches have stopped. They conclude the party, but are terrified as the aliens attempt to enter the house through the windows and chimney. Eric, one of the brothers, shoots and brings an alien's body inside the place and puts it in the back room. After securing the house once more and turning up the radio to block out the voices, the others finally convince Michael, another brother, to put down his camera and resume their card game. From its position across the room, the recording camera glitches and records what looks like 3 small gray aliens emerging from the back room. The tape ends as the aliens close in on the family. The film claims that the Van Hees' whereabouts are still unknown and that viewers should contact the producers if they have any information. Look, I'm the guy who wears the tinfoil hats. This is pretty good. I liked it. The footage from the woods, the small creatures, the Project Blue Book warning at the beginning of the film. It's a Sci-Fiers Friday night. Great film, and short, only an hour. And coming in at the number 1 spot, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a 2003 American horror film starring Jessica Biel and R. Lee Ermey. Its plot we're probably all familiar with if we've seen the numerous takes on this classic movie. It follows a group of young adults traveling through Texas who encounter Leatherface and his murderous family, a remake of Tobe Hooper's 1974 film and the 5th of the franchise. Erin and her boyfriend and friends are on their way to a Lynyrd Skynyrd concert in Texas. While driving through Texas, the group picks up a severely traumatized hitchhiker walking in the middle of the road. After they talk with the hitchhiker, she takes her own life with a concealed pistol. The group contacts police where they are led to an old plantation house where Thomas Hewitt is waiting, also known as Leatherface. Erin escapes and heads towards the woods, but Leatherface, armed with his chainsaw, follows each of the concert-driven friends one by one in an all-out slasher gore fest. Yeah, I watched this movie when I was 11 years old. No wonder I can't sleep at night. Erin escapes into the woods with Leatherface chasing close behind her and her friends, but she eventually injures him and halts the pursuit. Leatherface suddenly appears in the road and slashes the car with his chainsaw, but Erin manages to escape. 2 days later, 2 investigating officers are killed by Leatherface while doing a crime scene investigation of the Hewitt home, and the narrator states that this case still remains open. Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying, alright? Seems like this franchise was loosely based around a cannibalistic family in the South and actual evidence, case, and trial of Ed Gein. Number 5, the Blair Witch Project. I remember seeing this when I was like 10, and I'm not gonna lie, it kind of scared the shit out of me. It still does. It tripped me out because like back then my parents were like, oh, don't worry honey, this is made up, after like every scary movie we watched. But this time they were like, was that real? You know, my dad just sat there quiet thinking. I was scared. Because the whole production apparently did such an amazing job from top to tail of its release, making the audience still feel like it really happened. The Blair Witch Project is probably the most famous found footage movie ever made. The campaign tactic was that the viewers were told through missing persons posters and that the characters were missing while researching in the woods for this mythical Blair Witch. Their IMDb page even listed the actors as missing and presumed deceased in the first year of the film's release. Even the film's website contained actors posing as investigators giving testimonies about their evidence. They even shared childhood photos of the three leads to add a sense of realism. By August 1999, the website had received 160 million hits, and the movie went from a flop at midnight to the top worldwide. During screenings, the filmmakers made advertising efforts to promote the events in the film as factual, including the distribution of flyers at all of the film festivals such as Sundance and Cannes, asking viewers to come forward with any information about the missing students. All the actors making their feature film debuts as well were described as missing and presumed dead. The actors' parents even started receiving condolence calls and sympathy letters. The actors got to witness the movie blow up, but they weren't even invited to the screenings due to the publicity. Imagine not being able to go see your own premiere, or even really celebrate your huge role in this huge successful movie. It's kind of sad for the actors, don't you think? I think it is. Number 4, The Bay. Of course, if you like what we do here on Top 5 Scary, throw us a thumbs up down below or comment which one of these real-ish movies scared you the most. The Bay is a 2012 American mockumentary horror film directed by Barry Levinson and written by Michael Wallach. The movie's basically about a small town getting infected with a contaminated water source that 2 oceanographers discovered in the bay without saying anything. After investigating fish being eaten from the inside out, they realize that the culprit is this tongue-eating louse creature that looks like the bugs from like Starship Troopers. Yeah, really scary. The movie came out as a result of a documentary Levinson was asked to produce about real problems facing the Chesapeake Bay. Although Levinson chose to abandon the documentary upon learning that it was already being covered by a huge news network organization, Levinson instead decided to use all that research to produce this horror film, which he hoped would shed light on the issues facing Chesapeake Bay. As such, when promoting the film, he noted that more than 80% of the film is real and actually factual information. Also, 80% is so real that it had to wait to be released and cleared first. What? Yeah, this was like a real issue, hence the confusion around the found footage. Apparently this nuclear disaster monster giant isopod in the bay aren't real, but the small isopods filmed are very real. You see a tight shot of the isopod, Levinson said. That's not CGI, that's real. We just pulled that out of the Atlantic Ocean. The isopods do this really gruesome thing, which the bay does a great example of, is that they eat the fish from inside out. All that stuff is actually factual. A leaking nuclear reactor actually does have a runoff heading towards the Chesapeake Bay. Its quantities aren't great, but the fact that it's actually happening seems scary enough. The chicken farm runoff stuff is actually factual too. At the end of the day, yes, it's a movie, not a documentary, but it's infused with a lot of things that are really real. I think it adds to the nature of the piece, end quote. Hey, spoken like a true artist. And that's why the film has gotten so many great reviews. Give it a watch, very spooky, very well done. Number 3, the Poughkeepsie Tapes. Writer-director fam jam duo John Eric and Drew Dowdle are best known for their sinister yet impeccable found footage movies. Yeah, it's pretty gory and actually had to wait 10 years before being released due to the graphic footage on it. It's rumored that it was held for 10 years due to its contents and disturbing atmosphere, referring to it as a banned movie. It's likely that MGM felt audiences weren't really ready to see such graphic content. In an abandoned house in Poughkeepsie, New York, murder investigators uncover hundreds of tapes showing decades of a deranged killer's work. And in an all too realistic found footage mockumentary, the moments showing the killer POV are things of nightmares. I'm not gonna lie, this is like the goriest movie on our list today. But with scary movies, sometimes comes a little gore, you know? The Poughkeepsie Tapes plays out as a faux documentary following the discovery of a very large collection of VHS tapes created by said deranged psychopath, and the investigations that follow. The documentary is well shot and played out in a believable manner. Sometimes the acting is a little, yeah, this is really fake. And then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm gonna look up if that guy's a real cop. The feel of this movie is gore, gore, gore. If you're into like Saw type stuff and multiple victims and lots of popcorn syrup, this one's definitely for you. These tapes are only fictional, but there's a small catch. According to Marist College, the Poughkeepsie tapes may be based on an actual event. A killer named Kendall Francois killed 8 to 10 people in Poughkeepsie in the late 90s, but didn't videotape the murders. There's heavy debate in the film industry on which movies are depicting actual cases similar to actual reports, and acts that are totally staged and made up. Number 2, The Quiet Ones. The Quiet Ones is a 2014 British supernatural horror film directed by John Pogue, based on a very real 1972 parapsychology experience called the Philip Experiment, conducted in Toronto. It stars Jared Harris as a U of T professor attempting to prove that poltergeists are actually real manifestations of the human psyche and not actually supernatural beings. The movie is very scary, no doubt about it. Jared Harris is amazing, as always, but the real story behind it is actually way more terrifying. The professors of mathematics, science, and psychology created a fictitious character through an attempt to communicate with said fictitious entity through a controlled seance. It was the real deal. The character created and agreed upon was named Philip during the test. His fictional backstory coincided with real historic events and places, but with multiple contradictions and errors. They said he was born in 1624 in England, had an early military career, knighted by 16, in the English Civil War, and eventually dying at the age of 30. The group was seated around a table via a lecture, with initial seances yielding no contact, no communication, and no phenomenon. The professors then dimmed the lights, fully leaned into the seance, changing the environment. Participants and students then began feeling a presence. Lots of table vibrations, breezes, unexplained voices, and sounds which matched responses to Philip's life. Audio and video and witness accounts documented the paranormal event, but Philip never actually appeared. Yo, this actually happened, like down the street from us. This is terrifying. And number 1, Ghost Watch 1992. First broadcast on BBC One Halloween night 1992. Written by Stephen Volk and directed by Leslie Manning, the drama was produced for an actual BBC anthology series. Despite having been recorded only weeks in advance, the narrative was presented as a live television broadcast. During and following its first and only UK television broadcast, the show resulted in an estimated 1 million separate phone calls to the BBC that night, dealing with a mixture of complaints and praise for the program's bizarre release. Yeah, Ghost Watch has never been repeated on UK television. It's been replayed on stations such as the Canadian channel Scream for Halloween once in 2004, and the Belgian channel Canvas in 2008. The hour-and-a-half event was shot documentary style and appeared as part of the BBC. It involved actual BBC reporters performing a live on-air investigation of a so-called haunted house in London in which demonic poltergeists activity was taking place. Through found footage and interviews with family living there, they discovered the existence of a violent ghost nicknamed Pipes, a nickname from their kids. Footage actually showed the police arriving at Fox Hill Drive, and the spirit even dragged a BBC host behind a door. Yeah, that is horrifying. Imagine watching your weekly hosts on like a reliable television network that's censored and archived, and then all of a sudden the host just gets yanked up the wall by a supposed demon live on TV.
Now, found footage horror, for me anyway, is a subgenre that's either hit or miss in the world of horror cinema. On the one hand, it's an entirely captivating form and an unparalleled way to bring an audience into the visceral realm of point of view horror. When it's done well, we feel every agonizing step, every panicked breath, and every gut-wrenching reveal. But when it's done badly, yeah, it's really bad. Now, there are a few films that I'd still recommend that didn't make this list, but not because they're necessarily good, just because they're an experience, to say the least. August Underground, which is just messed up, Cannibal Holocaust, even more messed up, and Mark Duplass's Creep and Creep 2, to name a few. But let's get to the ones that are truly terrifying displays of found footage horror, shall we? Before we do that though, guys, you know the drill by now. If you're a fan of this video, found footage horror cinema, or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell so you can stay up to date with your daily dose of horror. Also, a huge thank you to all of our latest and greatest subscribers. We read every one of your comments, so stick around till the end and I just might read some of my favourites. Kicking off at number 5, the McPherson tape, 1998. Also known as Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County, the McPherson tape is an incredible display of science fiction horror done well, in a time when the found footage subgenre was just finding its feet. I'll be honest with you guys, when I first saw the McPherson tape as a kid, when it was broadcast as a straight-to-TV film, I thought it was actually real. And I wasn't alone either, because when it originally aired on UPN on January 18th, 1998, hundreds of people called in to verify that it wasn't actually portraying real-life events. So much so that the Lake County Sheriff's Department had to release a statement reassuring viewers that the events didn't take place. The McPherson tape centers around a family of the same name who have gathered together for Thanksgiving at their lake house when things quickly and mysteriously go wrong. As usual, I don't want to spoil any plot points for this film because it's definitely worth a watch, but if you're terrified of the thought of little green men roaming around your house at night, then you'll definitely be a fan of this film. Coming in at number 4, The House is October Built, 2014. And yeah, this film is great fun and so damn creepy for the most part. Directed by Bobby Rowe alongside hit producer Steven Schneider, the man behind the original Paranormal Activity, Insidious and The Devil Inside, The House is October Built is a fantastic spin on the found footage genre and features some genuinely terrifying set pieces throughout. It gives you that weird sense of dread that the subgenre tries so wholeheartedly to capture, but this film does it to perfection in parts. The House is October Built focuses on a group of friends, all horror fans may I add, travelling throughout southern USA in the lead up to Halloween. They've got an obsession with live action haunted house attractions, and the film plays out as a kind of mini road trip, ramping up the fake scares as it plays out. But while the fake scares quickly turn into real scares, and the second half of the movie really manages to turn up the heat. The strength of this film is how personal it feels. There's no wider scope other than the events that unfold before us, and it's backed up by a genuinely believable cast and likeable characters, which makes the ending that much more bleak. Give it a watch. Next up at number 3, Noroi, The Curse, 2005. Now, this is for sure an interesting film, to say the least, and it's a welcome sore thumb in the world of Japanese horror. It comes from renowned director Koji Shirashi, who's made quite the name for himself as a found footage auteur, with films like Occult and Shirome, a departure from the short, unsettling style often found in J-horror. Noroi is perhaps the best example of his work, and it stands out as a slow-burning mockumentary of paranormal investigation in Japan. Noroi features an absolutely mammoth task, interweaving several storylines that lead up to a deeply disturbing ending. For the most part though, it focuses on Masafumi Kobayashi, a paranormal expert famous for uncovering supernatural mysteries, and his investigation of a strange woman and her young son. It manages to give us just enough to keep the mystery going, and I don't say this lightly, pretty much every scene is unsettling as we quickly realise that there are much more malevolent powers at play. Swinging in at number 2, The Blair Witch Project, 1999. And you just knew this one would make this list, didn't you? Of course, perhaps the most famous found footage horror film of all time, and many people's first horrific dive into the subgenre. The Blair Witch Project is an awesome horror film, I'm gonna say it, and the impact that it had on the genre as a whole can't be denied. The reason that the Blair Witch Project is so damn good is because it managed to pull off exactly what terrifies us, a stark reminder that what really scares us is the stuff that we can't see, especially in a time when horror cinema was trying its hardest to deliver full frontal fear. Again, like with the McPherson tape, the Blair Witch Project relied heavily on viral marketing. Even a year after its release, the 3 actors, Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard and Michael C. Williams, were listed on their IMDb pages as missing or deceased. The film's creators, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, made huge strides in creating a working mythology for the film, drawing on 18th century folk legends to fabricate their own occultist backdrop, hinting to the viewer that perhaps there was some truth to the events of the film. In essence, it's what makes found footage horror so good when it's done well, an uneasy mix between horror fiction and horror fact. And finally, our number 1 spot, The Borderlands, 2013. Also known as Final Prayer in the US, but come on, the original title is so much better. The Borderlands is a 2013 British horror film written and directed by Elliot Goldner in his directorial debut. I'm going to say it, this film is awesome for many reasons, but the main reason is that it answers a question that somewhat mires the believability of found footage horror. Why are they still filming? Well, The Borderlands has a pretty decent answer for that. 3 men who were sent by the Vatican to provide evidence of demonic occurrences in a remote church in in rural Britain. I really don't want to spoil anything in this film because I sincerely urge you to watch it if you haven't. But in my opinion, this is one of the best found footage horror films of recent times. It's equal parts The Wicker Man and equal parts The Exorcist, and it's an awesome display of British folk horror, an emerging subgenre that is really hitting the mark for this particular horror fan. Really guys, I can't say much more other than just watch this one because it's really good.